Okay, so on today's edition, I'm going to be talking to you about 5 ways that you can guarantee that you're going to beat the cutoff in an Ironman. This is a topic that's come up recently for a lot of our athletes. We're about, as I'm recording this, we're about 10 weeks away from this year's Ironman Wales. And Ironman Wales is a great example of a course where prior planning is really going to affect your success on race day. And the reason for that is, although, and I've often said this before, people will have heard this before, although every Ironman is the same distance, they're not all going to be the same physical challenge and they're not all going to take the same relative amount of time. So a faster bike course is going to mean that you're finished on the bike course, obviously, much quicker than you are on a very tough, very hilly bike course like Ironman Wales. And the challenge that this brings up for people is that Ironman events have got a standard 17-hour cutoff. Now, this varies from event to event, so make sure that you check with the event that you're doing, you know the exact cutoff. But the added challenge of a really difficult, challenging bike course like the one at Ironman Wales is that for an athlete who might take 5.5 hours to do one of the faster courses, it can easily take 6.5 to 7 hours to do the bike course of Ironman Wales. And that additional time knock on gets greater the slower the athlete is. And so, in a lot of cases, we don't really have to worry about our athletes coming up against the time cutoffs. But in the really tough, challenging courses like Ironman Wales, athletes who usually we'd consider to be completely safe from being anywhere near the cutoffs, all of a sudden, that's going to come into play. And it's simply down to the nature of the really challenging, hilly, difficult nature of the bike course and the slower roads, meaning many, many more people are up against the cutoff than you would expect to. And this extends to athletes who are experienced Ironmen, who have done multiple events before. They're very often surprised by how close to the bike cutoff they're going to end up being. We spent a lot of time with our athletes over the last few weeks talking about this with specific athletes, in a lot of cases directly related to Ironman Wales, and talking about ways we can plan around that with, as I've said, at the moment, we've got 10 weeks to go to the race time. It gives you a chance to make some changes and do some planning that's really going to help play into your best chances of making those cutoffs. So that's where this episode is coming from. It's not for the athletes who are thinking about qualifying for Kona. It's our athletes at the other end of the scale who are much slower, for whom we really are concentrating on getting you to the point where you can be really confident with a high level of confidence that you're going to meet these cutoffs. So I've got 5 tips for you. The 5 are going to be related to one each to swim, bike, run, one for transitions, and an additional one for kit tips, things that you can do that are going to make you faster. So we'll go through them one by one. But first up, let's define the scope of the challenge for athletes. As we've said, it's a 17-hour cutoff at Ironman Wales. It's the same at lots of other races, but make sure you check if you're doing another race. We use Ironman Wales as an example. We've got this 17-hour overall cutoff, and that breaks down further to individual cutoffs for each of the legs. There's a 2-hour 20 cutoff at the end of the swim. There's a 10-hour 30 cutoff at the end of the bike, and that's from the start of the event, so total cumulative swim and bike time of 10.5 hours. And then there's a cutoff at the end of the run of 17 hours. So we can work backwards from this. If an athlete has done a 2-hour 20 swim, they're then going to have until 10 hours 30 to complete the bike leg. So it's left them 8 hours 10 for the bike leg. And if they then just make the cutoff on the bike leg, it then's going to leave them about 6.5 hours to do the run. So we can do our maths based around this. For some of you, you're going to be faster swimmers than a 2-hour 20 swim, and that's great. That's going to give you more time budget on the bike. For everybody, there's going to be that minimum of 6.5 hours on the run, because if you just beat the bike cutoff, you're going to have at least 6.5 hours to complete the run. And if you're a little bit faster than that, cumulatively, you're going to have even more time. So we're going to do our maths based on this. So first up, how can we guarantee that you're going to beat the cutoff on the swim? So the first place to start with this is know the kind of swimmer that you are. Know the kind of paces that you swim. With our athletes, we work on the basis of doing regular CSS tests. And if you don't know what that is, you can go away and look that up on Google. A CSS test gives you a really reliable measure of your, if you like, your threshold speed on the swim. And then we can say that our Ironman swim time is usually somewhere in the region of CSS pace plus 8 to 12 seconds per 100. So as an example of this, if your CSS pace is 2 minutes per 100, your Ironman swim time is going to be around 2 minutes 8 to 2 minutes 12 per 100. That gives you a really good feeling for how long the swim's likely to take you as a rough ballpark. And you can then get a feel for whether you're going to be close to the cutoff there. There are then some things that you can do that are greatly going to increase your chance of meeting the cutoff. We're not going to talk about training here specifically because we've done tons of episodes about training. But in terms of the gamesmanship of race day, the two things that I think you can practice to improve your swim are drafting off other swimmers and improving your sighting so that you're sure you're swimming the shortest possible route. So first up, drafting either directly behind another swimmer or on the hip of another swimmer is a skill that's going to save you, I'm going to say, between 4 and 8 seconds per 100 meters in terms of time saved. It means you can either swim on the feet of a faster swimmer and travel faster for the same effort, or you can swim on the feet of a swimmer going the same pace as you and go for much, much less effort. For most people, we want someone in between those two areas. So you're going a bit faster than you would be able to swim on your own, and you're saving some of the effort as well. But by going faster, by saving some energy for the rest of the day, you are going to reduce your swim time and you're going to reduce the overall amount of energy it's going to take you. The second thing we mentioned there is practicing sighting in open water swimming. Well, this is really important. Typically in Ironman swim legs, there's a long distance between the buoys. It's not unusual for there to be 500 meters between buoys where you're going to turn around, and often there's nothing in between them. If you can practice and learn to swim in a straight line, if you can get those skills of learning to sight on a buoy and having something in the background as a transact to sight against, you can make sure that you swim the minimum amount. And again, it's really common. An athlete will come to us after the event and say, the swim was really long. You know, it was meant to be 3,800 meters. I swam 4,400, 4,500 meters on my Garmin. Often other athletes in the same race have swum a much shorter distance, and often it is down to a sighting problem, and it's down to not swimming at the direct line. So practicing this in training is something that's really, really going to help you. If you're already not a particularly strong swimmer, you have definitely got the time to practice the skill of improving your sighting, even without necessarily needing to improve your swim fitness to cut down the time. Okay, onto the bike then. We're going to come up with a time budget on the bike of how long is your swim going to take you, and backwards work that by removing the amount of time you've taken from the swim from the overall bike cutoff. So let's say you are a 2-hour 20 swimmer. We take 2 hours 20 away from 10 hours 30. We're left with 8 hours 10. That's your time budget for you to complete the bike on race day. Now, in previous episodes, you'll have heard me talk about having a training stress score limit on the bike score to ensure that you can then run well. That still holds true, but there's a certain subset of people here. If you're up against the cutoff in an Ironman, you're going to have to do whatever you have to do in terms of training stress score to get yourself to the bike leg finish inside the cutoff. And so preparation and knowing what this is likely to be is the key part of how this is going to go for you. So for some of you, you are going to have to ride harder than I would ideally like you to do. You're going to have to ride harder than what I would consider to be a safe level of training stress to ensure a really good run, in order to ensure you even make it onto the run. And that's something that some of you are just going to have to accept, unfortunately. So we'll talk about a time budget. If you know that that bike leg is going to take you 8 hours 10, you can work backwards from that and work out what the average speed is that you're going to need to be maintaining on the bike. I would then highly advise that you go to bestbikesplit.com, use the free software that's available, and it's got the option there to reverse engineer how fast and how much power you're going to have to put out on each section of the course for you to complete the bike in that time. And that's going to be really useful to you. You can download a cheat sheet with power targets on. You can download the cheat sheet into your Garmin and have power navigation actually on the screen as you're riding. But what that's going to do is it's going to prevent you from riding too hard too early, but it's going to give you a really good level of confidence that the power level, the speed level, the pace level that you're riding at is appropriate for you to be able to get to the end of the bike leg and still beat the cutoff. So again, the caveat here is I would always usually try and say to people, look, let's make sure we're saving energy for the run here. If you're really up against it in terms of the bike cutoff, I would much prefer that you beat the bike cutoff and get to go onto the run and your legs are a bit more tired than you'd ideally want, than you completely miss that bike cutoff. Okay, so we've worked out your time budget for the bike. We can reverse engineer it using Best Bike Split, and you can then download that power profile into your Garmin and have a really high level of confidence that it's actually going to get you there. Okay, our third tip is going to be talking about the run. And my advice here is going to be to train your run to be the kind of speed that you're going to run on race day within your kind of, if you like, your run time budget. So if you know you're going to be pushing right up against the bike split cutoff, it's likely you're going to be pretty tired. It's likely you're not going to have your best ever run. And this is a common problem that some athletes find if they have overbiked. They can't run to anywhere near the same standard that they would expect to on race day because effectively they've blown their legs apart on the bike. So there's undeniably an element of preparing for a decent run in this. But also I would advise you, if you know that you're going to take longer than you ideally think you're going to on the run, I would actually advise you to practice doing some runs in training at a slower speed so your body gets used to the kind of run cadence that you're going to be doing actually on race day. So it's less than ideal, but I've done the maths and worked out here that if you are going to do a 6-hour 30 marathon, for example, that's going to be a 9:15 per kilometer or 15-minute mile. Now, I would guess that most of the people listening to this would never go out and try and do a run at that kind of speed. But if that's what you're going to do on race day, it would be it'd be really sensible, I think, for you to go out and practice doing some runs at that kind of slow pace, to feel what it feels like, to get your body used to going at that kind of slow pace. There's undeniably going to be long periods of walks involved in completing this marathon if you're up against the cutoff. So I'd advise you to get out in training and do some long hikes. It's really, really good training. If you've never been out on your feet for 6 hours without sitting down, it's going to be really challenging to do that on race day, even if you're walking. Remember, you're going to be walking on tired legs. So long hikes outdoors in training, in addition to your run training sometimes, or even sometimes swapping out one long run for one really long hike, can be really good at getting your body used to being on your feet for that period of time. I'll always remember a college professor of mine saying, one of the challenges of the marathon is most people in everyday life don't even stand up on their feet for 3 or 4 or 5 hours without having to sit down. And yet they expect to be able to do this on race day. Let's prepare for the challenges of the event that are coming up. Okay, the fourth tip that we've got for you is around equipment. There are equipment changes that you can make that are vastly going to increase the speed you'll ride the bike. And it is particularly on the bike, it's going to make the big difference. So I'd advise you again, go into Best Bike Split. There's all manner of different drop downs you can play within Best Bike Split where you can say, right, if I change my tires to a race tire, what effect will this have on me on race day? And see the time saving. If I change to race wheels, what effect will it have on me? If I add aero bars, if I rode a time trial bike, if I had on a skin suit instead of cycling kit, if I wore an aero helmet instead of a normal helmet, if I lost a few kilos of body weight, what effect would it have? Play with those sliders, and if you can afford to, spend the money on upgrading your kit to ensure you're going to meet the cutoff here. Because again, I've had athletes say to me, oh, I don't want to be that guy who's at the back of the pack wearing an aero helmet. But the reality is the aero helmet's going to save you 10 or 12 minutes off your Ironman time. And that's the difference to you make the cutoff or not. I think you have to accept you'd rather look a little bit uncomfortable than not make the bike cutoff. So again, go to Best Bike Split, play with the sliders and change things, and just see what the predictions will be on how much time that will save you. And our last tip for you is on transitions. I had a look at particular in Ironman Wales last year, and it's unique because there's a long transition between the swim and the bike leg. The fastest athlete did a 7-minute transition in T1 and under a 3-minute transition in T2. The slowest athletes were over 20 minutes in T1 and over 12 minutes in T2. So there's a difference there of about 20 minutes. If you're really up against the cutoffs, that time is going to be a big, big, big issue for you. So make sure you minimize the amount of faffing about and slowing down that you do in transition. You should ideally be straight into transition, have just the kit that you need in your transition bag, and be straight out again. There's no fitness element involved in the transition, aside for, as I've said, the Ironman Wales caveat where there's a run up the cliffs to get to T1. But if you can reduce the time needed just through skill aspects, you can save time that might be extremely valuable. So for those of you going out to do an Ironman this year, do this planning in advance. Don't let it be a surprise a few weeks before the event. Use Best Bike Split. Use the planning tools I've talked about here to work out what you're reasonably expected to do on the swim, the bike, and the run. And then look at ways that you can save time using these tools and these techniques that we've mentioned today. I hope it really works for you. I hope we get many more people beating the bike cutoff this year at Ironman Wales than we saw last year. There were tons of people DNF'd because they didn't make that bike cutoff. And it's heartbreaking because people have trained for a whole year and they don't get to experience that crossing of the line. So I really wish you all the best, but forewarned is forearmed. Go into this knowing what the challenge is and go in knowing that there are some pro tips here that can really help you, that the best age groupers are going to apply, that will apply to all age groupers and will help save you time, energy, and effort across training and racing. Okay, then. That brings us to the end of this week's episode. So here are some discount codes and deals for you. Over at precisionfuelandhydration.com, use the code OXYGEN24 for 15% off your first electrolyte order. And over at teamoxygenaddict.com, I think we've got the most comprehensive triathlon coaching program for busy age groupers. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today and the advice has helped you out, well, great stuff. I hope that's helped put some of your fears at rest. And I know from some of the calls we've had, it's helping raise the right questions in the minds of people as to whether their current coaching relationship is working for them. If you're looking for a change or if you're looking for high quality, proven coaching for Ironman or 70.3 triathlon this year, you can just check out the details of our coaching packages on our website at teamoxygenaddict.com. And then if you're interested, there's a link in the show notes below. You can join our waiting list and you'll be notified if a slot becomes available. And at that point, you'll have a chance to book a call with us and see if you'd be a good fit for joining the team. So although we don't have slots available at the moment, we'll make those call appointments available to people as and when we do have athletes who end their coaching packages during the season, if and when that happens. So remember, there's links in the show notes, so you don't have to remember them. Till next week, have a great, safe training and racing week. I'm Coach Rob Wilby, and you've been listening to the Oxygen Addict podcast. See ya.